I'm Kaylee, and today I'm talking about deal breakers. If I read this particular thing when I'm reading a book, that's a deal breaker, and I'm gonna stop reading, and I'm just like, nope, I'm done. Before we dive in, we're gonna reach back here to our Booktuber Shoutout book, and we're gonna shout out somebody randomly. Today's shout out goes to Gem of Books. I'll leave a link to their channel, so be sure to go over and subscribe to them. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel and follow me on Goodreads and Storygraph and Instagram and all the places. So today we're going to talk about some offensive content that will actually make me stop reading a book and probably throw the book in the trash. Maybe, yeah, probably. Not just something like, oh, I don't like love triangles, or I don't like, this locked room trope or whatever, but something that it's like, oh no, I feel very strongly about this. This book is going in the trash. I also want to make sure that I've explained very clearly, these are my deal breakers based on my comfort level about different issues. And the way that I think about these issues and the way I feel about these issues is incredibly personal to me. So in no way should this list of deal breakers or anything that I've said in this video be applied to any other reader anywhere. This is definitely not a guide for anyone else's reading. I'm just sharing with you guys my personal comfort level with some of these controversial or could be offensive things. These are things that I either find offensive or difficult to deal with, or I just know that I'm too sensitive to handle certain things. So that's my disclaimer. Don't take anything in this video too seriously because this is just my personal comfort levels. It doesn't really apply to anybody else. Okay, back to the original footage. So one of the top things that pretty much right away is a deal breaker for me in a book is profanity. That's why I read so many classics and children's books, because you don't see so much profanity in middle grade books and in Dickens, A lot of the times these days, I feel like I don't trust modern authors to keep things clean. Now, I will say that depending on how much profanity is in the book and the use of that profanity, it might be a total deal breaker where I'm just like, nope, done, not reading the rest of this. Or I might be like, I'll allow it, and then I'll just kind of continue on. If it's used very, very sparingly, then I can kind of see where it might be necessary for dramatic purposes or to illustrate the personalities of some certain character or something like that. If it's serving a use in the story and it's not excessive, also depending on which word is used, then I might say, well, I don't like it, but I can see why they used it. And so I will continue reading. Most of the time though, probably like 95% of the time, I'm just like, nope, this is not the book for me. No, thank you. There are so many different cultural ideas about when it or where or how it is appropriate or not appropriate to use profanity. And I just have to go by my personal comfort level. That is obviously not the same comfort level for other people. And so, yeah, everybody kind of has their own cultural guides of what sort of profanity and when it's appropriate to be used. So I'm not saying this to be like any sort of judgment on anybody. I'm just telling you about my personal comfort level and where that line is for me. The second thing that could probably be a deal breaker is violence. I'm a very sensitive person, and when I read a book, my imagination goes into overdrive. So if there is violence in a book, I feel like it's happening to me. I just have a very, very vivid imagination. And they've done studies that show that your brain chemistry reflects whatever that you're reading. So if you're reading about people in love, your brain chemistry is the brain chemistry of a person in love. So if you're reading about violence, then that stress response is being triggered in your body. So I really don't like reading about violence. That just grosses me out, for one thing. I've actually read books before that made me nauseated, made me physically nauseated from reading about it. So just like, I don't need that in my life. Ugh. I also tend to get nightmares. So, Yeah, I'd rather get a good night's sleep and just skip the nastiness. Thank you. The next one is graphic sexual content. Basically, if they're doing anything other than just hugging and kissing, then it's out. I don't want to hear about anything further. Whatever might be going on behind closed doors, I don't want to know. Yeah, so I don't need all the details about whatever was going on. Usually if I'm reading a book and it starts to get all hot and heavy or whatever, then I'm just like, okay, skip ahead a few pages. I might just skip it, or I might say, wow, this is really not for me, and just completely stop reading the book. So it kind of depends. Is it just like that one scene, or is it just all over the place and they're doing it like bunnies through the entire book? So again, kind of depending on like the intensity and the frequency of whatever's going on, I might just toss that book away, or I might just skip that scene and continue on reading with the rest of it. Number 4 is any sort of toxic romance or really toxic relationship. So if there's any kind of emotional abuse going on, either in a romance, especially in a romance, it feels like, or some sort of family relationship that is toxic or something, and if it's not being handled correctly in the narrative. So if there's a story about this toxic relationship and how this person overcomes that abuse and separates from that toxic person, or about how the toxic person realizes that their behavior is unacceptable and inappropriate and just not good, and then they start trying to do better. So like if this toxic relationship is acknowledged as toxic and the people are trying to repair that, then good. But what I'm talking about is a toxic relationship where there's some kind of abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, something is going on, and the narrative treats that as if it is normal or as if it is exciting or something, and it is not dealt with properly. That's a huge deal breaker. That's throw the book in the trash deal breaker. This next one is kind of difficult. I really take this on like a case-by-case basis. If I see any sort of racism or sexism or just some kind of really horribleness in the narrative, that will make me stop reading. But again, it kind of depends on how is it dealt with. Is it dealt with in a healthy way? Is it dealt with in an unhealthy way? And I also have to consider the source. If there's a racist comment in a classic, then I tend to be more understanding, at least. I don't like it. It still offends me. I hate reading about that. But considering the source from back in history, you have to think, well, this is the culture that they came from. It's still not okay. It's still not good. It's still offensive, but that doesn't make me throw out the book. I try to look at it as this is an interesting window into history and how people have thought in different ways all through history in different cultures, and they look at other people differently, whether it's someone who has a different ethnicity from them or someone who has a different gender from them, and they have these preconceived ideas and judgments about people. And that is true through all of history, in every culture, in every era. There are prejudices everywhere, all around us. So I try to look at it as kind of a cautionary tale to be careful about my own prejudices or preconceived ideas. And it also reminds me that the only true compass for morality is the Bible, because every culture and every era throughout history has their own morality and their own way of thinking about things. But the only morality that is true and lasting is what we find in the Bible. Of course, that being said, there have been classics that were just so racist where I was just like, I cannot read this anymore, and I actually did throw it in the trash. Yeah. But usually with classics, I try to just look at it through this historical lens and learn lessons from history, learn lessons from the past, and try to be grateful that we have progressed so far. It's really good to be able to look at the past and realize how far we've come today. Okay, and the last one on my list is any sort of immoral teaching. I have read books, children's books, little children's picture books, that encourage children to lie. I'm not even kidding you. Like, isn't it fun to lie? Okay, that book went in the trash. My goodness, what on earth? I also read a middle grade book that glorified suicide. There was a character who committed suicide, and it was treated as if it was noble, and it was their only way out, that they could die with dignity. Really horrible, immoral teaching, very dangerous ideas. That book went in the trash. Horrible. I've read books that have glorified vandalism and theft, saying just like, oh, isn't it fun? And what a rush. And there were no consequences for those characters who stole or who vandalized things. And so just the way that it was presented was specifically to teach awful, immoral ideas. I don't understand how these books would get published. Seriously, like who are the publishers? Who is publishing this trash? Oh my goodness. I mean, I think pretty much everybody from any religion, from any moral code would agree that, lying is wrong and stealing is wrong. So I just don't understand who these people are that they think it's a good thing to glorify stealing and suicide and lies and horrible stuff. Yeah, that's a deal breaker. I'm sure I'm probably missing something. I can't think of anything else at the top of my head, but I'm sure there's probably something else where I'm like, oh yeah, that one's a deal breaker too. But you guys have to leave me a comment and let me know, what am I forgetting? Is there something else that would be like a huge, major deal breaker? Not just little things that annoy you in the writing or something, but something where it's like, no. This is just awful and I have to throw this book in the trash. Leave me a comment and let me know. What am I forgetting? Is there something else? I really feel like there's something else. And I'm just like, why can't I think of it? I don't know. I'm back a few days later because I started editing this video and then remembered what it was that I wanted to add in as another deal breaker, but I forgot when I was actually filming. Another deal breaker is when an author mocks Christianity or somehow misrepresents Christians or other religious people, or just mocks people who have faith in God. I'm a very devout Christian, and certainly I find it offensive when an author mocks Christianity. Depending on just how extremely offensive or what sort of comment against Christians is made in the writing, then I might just completely stop reading the book and just be like, wow, this author is definitely not for me. We are obviously not going to agree, and so I don't want to read their book. Or I might just say, okay, well, they misunderstood something about Christianity and they just didn't know, and so I'll just kind of gloss over that and continue reading their work. So depending on whether it just seems to be a misunderstanding on the author's part or whether the author is purposefully attacking Christianity, then one way or the other, that would be a deal breaker. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.